got a Skype update there.
We look back on Daryl Rocky Top.
It's game day.
Game day.
Game day. Game day for my Vols. I think we're actually 1 point underdogs, the Purdue Boilermakers, who haven't sniffed the Elite Eight in I don't know how many years. Yeah, I'll be, and icing on the cake, I'll be able to watch the entire thing because it starts at like 6:20. So that's perfect. Right in my wheelhouse. Means around 8:30 to max 9 o'clock bedtime, which is usually where I see DVR have it come into play so I can record it. But going to be a good game. I know it's going to be close. And I got quite a few Purdue Boilermaker athletes that I coach. And they've already been talking a little smack. So will be interesting to see. But this is not the March Madness bracket cast. This is the Crushing Iron podcast.
Hang on a second. I got to look up on Wisconsin song for next year.
Yeah, for next year. I mean, that's kind of, you guys are turning into the Cubs. Wait till next year.
Oh,
wait till next year.
Here we go.
Wait till next year. No.
I got to say, it's affected me, man. I'm like, this is like, we were 10 out of 16 Sweet 16s, and I just feel a little bit empty.
Yeah, well, maybe that says more about you than it says about Wisconsin.
Oh, 100% says more about me. It means I need to get a life.
Wait, I mean, you said it. Not me. As long as you're not the guy that's already like sitting back in his Wisconsin Badger football jersey with a bag of Doritos and a Mountain Dew Surge, scouring the message boards to talk about the third string guard who's come up from community college in Oregon who might just be the guy to set our season around.
Well, I'm wearing a Crushing Iron shirt for first of all.
Okay.
Which are for sale on our website, crushingiron.com.
This is true.
But I have been scouring the message boards. We lost one of our guys is transferring. So similar but different. Anyway, this is
back
the Crushing Iron podcast, Triathlon talk.
Life talk.
Just sitting here drinking a coffee, eating a Fifth Avenue bar.
Telling you, it's taking the world by storm.
I know. Stock's rising.
Stock is rising. Episode 255.
Today?
Yeah.
I've got 254, but you could be right.
No, I think it is 254. But yeah, every Monday and Thursday, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks again to everybody who has subscribed and has continued to listen to us over the years, and we appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, we really do.
You emailed me yesterday, and as we joked about your notes and your outline on the previous podcast, I must have spoken into fruition because you emailed me yesterday with like a very stringent outline. Where I feel like you borderline might as well have just sent me a teleprompter. But so for all the days that Mike might not have a ton of input on concrete topics, every once in a while he pulls out how many bullets is this one?
7, I believe.
Oh yeah, 7. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a 7-point bullet on building confidence.
Oh,
nice.
Hey, so, yeah, if you're new to the cast or you've been listening for a little bit and haven't left a review, go to iTunes and leave a review. I thought I'd read a quick review since...
Go for it.
All right. Love this podcast. 5 stars. Robbie and Mike have gotten me through some of the toughest training sessions. They humanize the sport and give great tips along the way. Well worth a listen. Huh. That was nice.
Very kind of them.
I think so.
It's better than some of our 1-star reviews.
Yeah, I guess we have gotten a 1 star.
Everybody gets 1 stars. But here's
you're not real.
Here's my rib on you 1-star people. At least give a comment. Because that's not feedback.
That's the tip that we know.
Yeah, that's the hey, I listened to it for 30 seconds and I didn't like it. 1 star. I mean, some of our casts probably do suck, but still, most of them most of them are pretty good. But you got to give it a listen, and you got to at least give some constructive feedback. But yeah, we do appreciate people who take the time and to give us positive or constructive feedback. It helps us do the best that we can, helps attract other triathletes to the podcast, and helps build the community that we have that is housed inside the Crushing Iron Facebook group. If you're not in the group and you want to be a part of it, you can go over to Facebook, search Crushing Iron Group, and as long as you're not a robot or some made-up dude living in a coffee shop in Zimbabwe, we're probably going to let you in. Simple question is, what do you like most about the podcast? And you can be as honest, and it can be as short or as long as you want, and then we'll let you in. And there's always great conversation, great topics, lots of questions, as it is the contrast to many other triathlon groups where you won't see a lot of people, showing their trainer face every Tuesday with their Garmin screenshot, hashtag Ironman prep. It's more constructive questions, comments, looking for general, it's really seeking answers where you feel comfortable getting constructive answers. I guess it's a microcosm of how you should be leaving reviews. It's not, they won't give you a 1-star and no comment or you're an idiot. It's a safe place to post questions. We have fun. We have a good time. Tons of information there. So hop on in there. And then if you want to look a little more extensively at the things that we offer, you could always go to crushingiron.com and check out the list of services and things that we provide, from blog, videos, swim analysis, triathlon and swim camps, coaching and training packages, our club, info about our team, and other podcasts that you can search. So you can always go there. And again, that's crushingiron.com.
Yeah, man. How's your confidence level these days?
Well, that's a loaded question for one.
I know.
Because confidence is, I think, first of all, I think confidence is often a word that means, again, it's one of those relative terms. Mm-hmm. Like, and then, so are you talking about athletically, or are you talking about in training, or are you talking about in life?
Yeah. I'm talking about training and in life and in racing. I mean, training and racing and stuff.
I'm confident that I'm making the right choices right now.
That's good. I'm glad somebody is.
So let me give context to that. So
I think I know what you're talking about, but
so I was having an athlete discussion yesterday, and who were a new athlete discussion where they were inquiring about coaching and services, and sometimes athletes will have like one question, sometimes athletes will have like 20, and they want to go over them, and which is perfectly fine. Love that. I think I encourage it. I don't need the outline, just fire away. And one of the last questions that this person asked was, are you currently training for anything? Which is a great question, and one that a lot of athletes, I don't think, ask, because if we're being honest, a majority of triathlon quote unquote coaches are also triathletes themselves, mm-hmm. whether they are professionals or if they would call themselves elite, or they are just very good, or even just whatever. They're a triathlete, so they're committed to a specific number of hours to train per week to reach their goal, and that's their number one focus. And that takes time, And I am very fortunate enough and very lucky to have the opportunity to where I do this as my full-time job. And so while I do have extra hours to do it, I'm not doing it as like a side hustle or as a side hobby. It's my full-time job. But I do have restraints that I put on myself in terms of, I don't want to be, working out at 7:00 at night when my family's having dinner, mm-hmm. And so, but I thought it was a great question, because a lot of athletes, and to be honest, fair or large amount of coaches who are triathletes, their training comes first. They're more likely to make sure that their ride gets in, and then if they can get to you, they just get to you. And they're very serious about it, because it's their goals, and their goals are important. But when she asked me, I said, right now, honestly, I'm just training. I'm just getting in what I can get in. I have a purpose. I have a long-term goal. But right now, with how things are going and our move, and moving in June, and the camps we have coming up, and travel that I have coming up, and job stuff with Allie and going to Chattanooga, I have to be realistic and move things around based on what's most important to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I love coaching and I love what I do. And so right now it doesn't make sense for me to try and smash in 15, 14, 18 hours of training to get my goal, because then that would be taking away from the other things. And so while my training volume might not be super high, I'm confident in where it's at because I helped put it there. And I guess I'm confident in the decision of where I am that's led me to get to where I am right now.
Yeah.
Oh, is it the best shape I've ever been in my entire life? No, not the moment. But it's commensurate to where I want it to be and its relationship to everything else. And so therefore, I'm happy with it.
Mm-hmm. Look, man, I think that's not a small feat. I can see how easily coaches could get wrapped up in their own training, and I experience it a little bit with the club and in my training, and it's sort of like, as a coach, you want to be able to show that you can do it and whatever. And I think what you're doing is really, really confident. Actually, it's one of those things where you're pouring your energies into other people, and it's one of those things where you see coaches in NBA or something, Jeff Van Gundy, he never played, but the dude is obsessed and really cares about the game and his athletes and his team and stuff like that. And I think there's something really awesome about that, finding your kind of balance. And maybe you're in the beginning phases of that, because obviously you're going to be training, you're going to be racing and stuff like that. But for now, it makes a lot of sense to do what you're saying. And I don't think that's easy to do, personally.
It's not, and it's a balance of what matters the most to you right now. And again, like everybody says, triathletes are selfish, and triathlon is a selfish sport. It doesn't have to be. And again, like on the you alluded to, a lot of coaches also, like, they feel this enormous amount of pressure that if they don't perform well, then if they're not fast enough or they don't meet a certain threshold, then people aren't going to want to coach them because so many people think, well, you're fast, so you must be a good coach, or you must know exactly what you're doing, when that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at some of the best triathlete coaches in the world right now, they barely dabbled in the sport at all before they decided to take up coaching full time, or barely did triathlon at all. And they came from a different background. They just learned for experience of, coaching. And you see this across the board with, football, basketball, hockey, baseball. The greatest players rarely ever either have the interest in coaching or end up being good coaches. It's always like somebody who was barely even not even drafted that ends up being a great coach. They come up through the ranks. They come up, or just never touching the basketball. They started out as the video guy, and they just learned, like Eric Spoelstra, I think, he barely played any basketball, but he started out as the video guy for the Miami Heat and then worked his way up to the head coach and won an NBA championship.
Yeah.
So I think that, and while that's, totally different because he had a bunch of good players, but you get the picture. There's pressure to be had. And I think a lot of triathlon coaches feel that they attach that to their identity is my personal performance going to help me in my business? And so by choosing to maybe take a step back, like I have right now personally, and kind of had to think because people always talk about balance, and there's tons of books coming out about, how is balance good, or is even such a thing as balance. And, it's there's only a certain amount of things that you can devote all of your energy to.
Yeah.
And you could try to be really, really, really good at 2 or 3 things in life, or you can just try to be okay at 20. And right now, coaching for me, and how much I just genuinely love it, and I love this opportunity, and I will always, as long as I'm generally healthy, I'll be able to do triathlon for in the next 20 years, if not longer. But I don't know how much longer I'll have the opportunity to do something like I'm doing right now. And so to me, it's more about, seizing the moment and the opportunity, and just in being confident in myself and my own priorities, and feeling like I'm truly doing what's best for my life at the moment and what brings me the most joy. And then I don't really have to explain that to anybody, because I'm, it helps me sleep at night.
Yeah, man, you're taking a lot of variables off the plate, I mean, training can really seep into your head. If you've always got, something out there hanging, a workout you might have missed, or, just these goals and things like that. I can see that for sure. Do you want to go down this list here?
Yeah, man, go for it.
But so we're going to talk about ways that as an athlete, maybe new to the sport, or you've been around for a while and you're kind of wavering back and forth about how you feel about what's going on, how you can sort of build confidence in your training and your racing. And I ran across this video, and I just kind of took some bullet points, and I thought we could talk about them. And it was basically about confidence in general, but I thought we could apply them to triathlon. And the first one is to confront your fears. And I think a lot of people do that generally when they get into triathlon, for one. So that's a great step in that direction. And then, I guess you could say that as you go up a level, you're kind of confronting another fear. Or how did you think about that? What was the first thing you thought of when you thought about confronting fears in this sport? I always think about open water swims and things like that, but
it is again. Well, let me do this if you don't mind, real quick. I want to name them all, because there's also a very, very solid chance we aren't going to get through all of them.
Okay.
Knowing the way that we go off, and so it's a great list, and it's building confidence. The first one, and we'll talk about it here in a second, is confront your fears. 2, own your strengths. 3, set attainable goals. 4, help someone. 5, separate your weaknesses. 6, stop comparing. And then the last one is look confident. And I think we should try to get through all this, because I think it's a great list. But confronting your fears, I think that as long as you're doing it appropriately, because there's responsible and objective and constructive ways to address things that you're scared of, or things that you have a fear, where fear comes to mind when this comes up. And going into that fear and in not challenging it, but recognizing it and accepting it, and then understanding that it's nothing to be fearful of. It's more of a representation. Like, obviously there are certain things in life we all fear, and a lot of them are just physical. Like, no one wants to get shot in the head. That's a legit fear. But a lot of things and a lot of fears we all have in life have almost no huge responses that would really truly affect our life in a grave way. But we have these fears, whether they're rational or irrational, or whether we think they're irrational based on our experiences in life. And so I think that if you find ways to, if you're afraid of open water swimming, if you have a fear of really hard hills, if you have a fear of a certain distance, if you whatever it is, as long as you find a way to address it mentally and ask yourself those really hard constructive questions of why are you actually afraid of this? And because you're going to have to ask yourself that 4, 5, 6, 7 times before you get to the actual root answer of, I went through this yesterday with talking with an individual on the phone. Why do you feel like you're slow? Okay, well, this is okay. Well, why? Okay, then what's the very, 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 very first memory you ever have of labeling yourself as slow? Boom, immediate. Well, in the 9th grade, there was this. It all comes back to this, but we've forgotten or pushed aside that. Okay, let's go back and let's start to reframe or address that specific issue. And so you can do that, but then again, on the flip side, that's a constructive, positive way to address fear in a healthy way, in a way that you can actually get good feedback. The other way that I think a lot of athletes also address or confront quote-unquote fears is to dip their toe in the water, or even set themselves up for failure again. Because this is very common, just as we are as humans, is that a lot of times we would almost rather put ourselves in situations where we can reaffirm that we're justified in being afraid versus going to a specific length or putting ourselves in a specific situation to where we have the opportunity to go through that really deep, uncomfortable part of overcoming a fear. Because some people will, and I think everybody's probably done this to an extent in their life, is they would almost rather reaffirm why they're afraid and therefore internally justify that fear. See, I don't need to. Why am I beating myself up about being afraid of this? Mm-hmm. See, it's normal for me. I'm just this way. Like, why are you that way? Well, I've always been that way. No, you haven't. What happened at one point in your life to where you felt you were always this way? And then you just, again, back to our podcast a couple weeks ago, then that's how you begin picking up the pen and writing your story based on this fear. And so I think you got to go back to the root of it, to the why of it, what it comes down to, and then you have to take time. You have to take time to break it down, and then go for it. And put yourselves in situations to where you're just, and you might not ever be comfortable doing it, but you have to confront it. Don't expect to get comfortable every time you confront a fear. You just have to keep doing it. Yeah. And you have to put yourself again in positive situations that still, fear to an extent, and the challenging of it and the confronting of it is still a lot like applying a training load for an athlete. Is you want to give enough to where they can see and still feel challenged, but it doesn't break them. It was an appropriate level, and it was an appropriate amount of that application to where they felt stretched thin, but they didn't stretch so thin that they broke. Mm-hmm. And the fear, I think, in your confronting fears is the same way, in that you don't want to recreate some like traumatic, awful experience. You just want to start by, you're terrified of flying, so I'm going to put you in the cockpit of a plane. But that's all we're going to do today.
Yeah, we're going to go all on.
Exactly. It's not like we're going to put you in a plane and then we're going to do a nosedive, then we're all going to jump out the parachute. Mm-hmm. It's like that. That would be bad.
Yeah, that would take some years off your life. I think there's.
Yeah, or all of them.
I mean, you have to. It takes time, I think, and I think people that aren't afraid of certain things like open water or cycling or whatever probably grew up in those situations. I thought there was a great example in this video. They said they used the two examples of, one was crossing like a busy road of traffic, and the other was speaking in public. And most people are way more afraid of speaking in public, even though
right.
Even though you can die crossing a busy road. I mean, right. Literally get hit by a car and die. So, but the reason is probably because you were probably that same scared the first time you ever did it, but you've done it so many times in your life. You've crossed roads so many times in your life, but you haven't spoken enough. So it's one of those things where, yeah, like you're saying, don't try and climb the biggest hill on the block. Just start with, smaller hills or, little swims and lakes, real safe, shallow kind of stuff, and it takes time to build that up.
Yeah, go speak in front of 2 people, not 250.
Right.
Your very first time. But it's the practice. It's the practice and the mindset of, and this went back kind of the conversation I had yesterday with this athlete, was like it's more about the mindset and the daily practice of addressing and confronting, not choosing to be so apprehensive and run away.
Yeah.
Like you don't get less points for going to speak in front of 2 people and succeeding than going out in front of 250 and failing. Mm-hmm. Just be appropriate with it. But again, it's a mindset of, I'm just choosing. It's not about choosing not to be afraid or fearful of an event or of a distance or of a route or of whatever, or an environment that you're training in, or the fear of failure. It's like there's just so many things attached to it. So again, I think it's a great one to address. And again, I think it's the root of a lot of the reasons why athletes feel or are held back in their performances or in their training or in their day-to-day life, because it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because again, you're comfortable.
one story I don't think I've told on here, but when I was a young kid, we were on sort of a family vacation or something, and we were swimming at, like a apartment complex pool or something like that. And I was young, maybe 5 or 6, and I remember almost drowning. And I don't necessarily think I was at risk for totally drowning, but I just remember I had this feeling of like, oh my God, I was going under. I couldn't, I was young. And obviously I didn't. But I think that there was something planted there. And when I first did my first Ironman, it was Wisconsin, and it was that mass swim. And you know how I was about how excited I was about, I just kept talking about how pumped I was for that mass swim start. And I watched videos nightly almost for like the whole year. And I just watched. And I was afraid is my point. It scared the crap out of me. But I watched those things, and somehow over time it just turned into this kind of like excitement about it. And I thought that was interesting. And ever since, I've just, as much as I still kind of fear the swim on some deep level, and I've had anxiety battles many times, it's become sort of a challenge or an excitement factor for me. It's the thing I look forward to most usually is the swim, even though it can cause me some problems. So I think that might be maybe a little thing you can do too, is just expose yourself to it, or kind of face it visually and kind of let your mind adapt to it and see it and be familiar with it, and maybe there's something to it.
Well, as far as exposure to open water or even racing in general, some athletes are just scared to race. But I think there's a common misconception, I think, that people always assume if you're fearful, you must also have a high level of anxiety, which is not true. You can be generally afraid of something, or of a thing going poorly, or an event going bad, or speaking in public, or an open water swim, that it might not go well, but there's not always anxiety associated with it, because fear can also be just of fear of consequence, not fear of disaster. And so again, it's about, because there's some things in life you'll just always be afraid of, or you always might be fearful of, but when you start to remove that anxiety, you begin to lower that barrier to more opportunities to confront that fear. And it may never go away, but you reduce or eventually eliminate the anxiety that may come with just being fearful.
Mm-hmm. And there's a physiological element too. It's easier to be, I think, afraid when you're cold and uncomfortable. So that's why I'm such a big proponent of warming up good before a race, for example. I just think once you get your blood flowing and everything like that, the fears aren't as powerful.
Mm-hmm.
The second one here is own your strengths. And I love this because they were talking about how you could get 100, maybe like in our podcast review, for example, when we started, we got 100 great reviews, and then we got one bad one, and that was the one that just stuck out. It was like, it's like, man, a lot of people like this, a lot of things are going great, and we're positive and feel good about it, and then you get one negative comment about, you're training well, you're feeling good, and then all of a sudden somebody says, "Oh man, you're looking like you're putting on some weight or something."
Or are you sick?
Are you sick? Yeah, and then you're just wrecked. So, yeah, that's just a huge one. It's almost like, that's why I like to sort of recommend journaling and kind of reminding yourself by writing it out that things are going well and you're getting better at certain things and you're getting stronger and you're feeling good, and like reflecting back on where you came from and things like that, because it's easy to lose track of the fact that you're getting better and stronger, because it's a slow growth. And then all of a sudden, like a negative comment will come in and derail you for a week.
And I think it's a physical, emotional, and mental battle that, as athletes that are in the process of addressing their current state to try and continually get better, and you're in that what feels like an endless pursuit of trying to get to X, Y, or Z, or to always feel better. It's hard, because you always look for, I think there's a really huge difference in again, this like misappropriated stigma on, training for weaknesses versus always looking for ways to get better. Because let's be honest, a lot of triathletes aren't always looking for a way to get better. They're just looking for a lot of ways that they aren't very good, which is totally different. Because one is, let me figure out X and Y so I can eventually be Z. Not, again, concreting or affirming why I'm not fast or why I continue to fail, or, opening up opportunities to insert excuses. Like we always go back. Everybody's the butt. Every race is a butt. Yeah. I mean, I did pretty well today. A PR by 45 minutes, but I just can't seem to get the swim down, man. Like I just, I PR the swim by 10 minutes, but still, like there was this buoy. Then I should have cornered, but so it definitely could have been 50 or 55 minute PR. But don't get me wrong, man. I'm happy. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy. I'm pumped. It's like things are working out. I'm in. The process is great. But again, like there was a run, and like and I missed aid station number 4 because I dropped my cup, and if I had more hydration, like I probably could have got 3 or 4 more minutes. And I'm not saying anything. Again, I'm happy. But again, but then thinking again, like back to going on the bike, like I got held up by the motorcycle, and like these stupid athletes were riding like 5 abreast, and I couldn't get around them, so then I swerved, and I got super frazzled, and I was stressed out. So for the next 10 miles, I forgot to drink, and there's probably another 3 or 4 minutes. So again, don't get me wrong, I'm happy, but I could always be better.
Yeah, back to the drawing board, man.
Back to the drawing board. While that was somewhat humorous, that it's true, and every athlete's probably A, laughing, B, crying, because that you are that. Everybody does that. We've all done it. I mean, I used to be that way after every single race, and to an extent, I still am. And my wife's always like, I just don't get you. She's like, I don't understand. And the biggest one was last year at Chattanooga, where I got on the podium for the 7.3, and I wasn't happy.
You were happy.
I was happy, but I didn't.
No, you're right, though. You said that wasn't your best race.
First thing
by far.
I told you. I said I'm happy, but it was.
You said I'm not going to that damn medal ceremony.
I was, but I was judging myself based on my effort, and I wasn't that happy with it. But anyway, going back towards the strengths, you can maximizing your strengths and remembering that you have them physically is the same thing as remembering those good days, not carrying all the bad days with you. Do you need to remember them? Absolutely. But like, if you think about it this way, like so many like professional coaches, they'll always tell you like, what I remember most are like the narrow defeats. Like Pete Carroll, he'll probably never be able to forget or forgive himself for making that idiotic call against the Patriots in the Super Bowl like 4 years ago, where he should have easily won. But
UFC.
Yeah,
again,
the USC
the tip in against Duke.
Or you're talking about when they had Reggie Bush and Lindell White.
I'm talking about that game the other night when that Duke almost lost and that tip in. That guy's going to remember that for the rest of his life.
Exactly. But so the thing is do you remember it and own it and become always that to hang your hat on? Or do you use those to differentiate yourself from who you used to be when that happened to who you want to eventually become? And the lessons you've learned from it and the experiences that you eventually will have, it's using those weaknesses or those things that happen as an opportunity to propel yourself to do other things or become stronger in that area. Like you'll have athletes. You have two kinds of athletes. You have athletes who understand that swimming is just something that they really struggle with. And that they are just okay with that. I'm just always going to be a slow swimmer. I didn't really pick it up till like 2 years ago, and that's okay. And I'm just always going to be slow at. So what's the point? Coming to the going to the pool a couple times a week because I'm not going to get that much faster. So it's pretty short. And they're all down to anyway, and you get to wear a wetsuit, and half the time they're canceled. So like, I don't have to do that. And so they're okay with their weakness. I'm like, so I'll just like get super strong on the bike and the run. I'm just going to crush it. And then you have athletes who, the same count, have only swam for a year or two, and they're they realize it's their weakness, and they don't want it. Then they're tired of it consistently affecting their strengths. Because congrats on being a super great biker, but if you can't get in the water and it happens, I mean, you can see it. You can see the panic on people's face when the race director on the morning of is like, water temperature 79.5. Everybody goes into like panic mode and sprints, and they're like, yeah, I'll probably just go in the wetsuit anyway. Or, you know what? I'm not feeling too well today. I think I'm just gonna, it's stop accepting the weaknesses and remember that you have strength in so many other areas, so you have the ability to be strong. And it just don't identify that you can't have it in more than one area. It's about being your best all around athlete, that you can be to perform well, as a triathlete, and it's like having a runner who can run a 1:20 open half marathon, but they just suck at swimming and cycling. Well, in triathlon, well, guess what? It's not a running event, so you need to work on the other things. So let's say that athlete takes a little extra time to work on their weaknesses and still keeps their strength, but it's not maybe a 120 strength, it's a 125 strength. But they've been able to improve their weaknesses in swimming and cycling over leaps and bounds, and now they're absolutely crushing it. So now what's better? And so again, it's about addressing the weaknesses, utilizing your strengths, understanding that you have the opportunity still to be strong in other areas as well.
Yeah, and if you're a good runner, that's a huge part of it. So don't forget that either,
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the third one here is set attainable goals, and this really goes back to the confronting fears thing too. Something that you can handle, baby steps,
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of keeps building, like we were saying, if it's running hills, don't run up the steepest hill right out of the gate.
Right.
Just work those hills, and the next thing you know, you'll be like, you won't notice the little hills, and then all of a sudden you'll be creeping your way up that. And it's a big deal, And I'm not the best at this either, setting lists, putting lists together, setting goals, and kind of really putting them down on paper, though, I think is a good idea. If you're, of course, you got the training plans, and just paying attention to what you're doing. And
work your way backwards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, oh, I want to climb Everest. Okay, great. What do you got to do first? Just generally prepare for base camp. But like that's like, oh, I want to climb Everest. I want to be at the top, and all they think about is what and how they need to train for those last, 2,000 meters of the climb to get to the top of Everest. Instead of, man, it's going to take me a lot of work just to prepare to go to base camp altitude at like whatever feet it is. It's like, and then I got to stay there for a few weeks to get acclimated again before we even start to make my ascent to the top. But prepping for base camp doesn't sound very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not be good enough, and it might not, because you see this often too, is the relationship between a fear and a set goal. Usually what happens is they both have an equal relationship to each other. I am totally terrified and have major doubt that I can even finish a 10K. I'm signing up for a 50 miler.
That doesn't happen.
Yes, it does. I deal with these people every single day. I can tell you with 100% confidence that that's the conclusions. Like it's a reciprocated response. The bigger the fear, the larger the goal an athlete tells himself they must accomplish to end up squashing that huge fear.
Oh yeah, they just want to squash it.
Yeah, it's
obliterate it.
Yes, exactly. It's because that's how big their fear is. Because in order to squash this fear, to totally overcome it, and how long they've had it, you know what I've got to do? I have to go way over.
Yeah.
Over to meet this expectation or lose this label of myself, or convince myself that I'm not, or reach this pedestal. I can't just, be good enough or just conquer it. Like, in a matter where no one's watching and it doesn't matter, it has to be grandiose, because my fear has that relationship with me to where it's all consuming and I feel like everyone knows. So yeah, the larger the fear, the larger the relationship. I'm not very comfortable with open water. Let's swim the English Channel. Because that will overcome that will overcome my fears, and I will be able to do it. But again,
I like that idea.
even if you have that mindset, swimming the English Channel won't have been when you overcame your fear. It'll have been along the way when you continue to decide to participate in a process or a trajectory or a journey that's geared towards preparing you to not be that way anymore.
If you're going to swim the English Channel and you're afraid of open water, that's probably something you want to do maybe in a few years, not like this month.
And
You know,
I've looked into swimming the English Channel and what it might take after I did that 10-mile swim. And I got through about 3 to 4 paragraphs of reading about like what you would need to do to prepare it, and I was out.
Yeah, you got to put on like 30 pounds.
You got to put on like an insane amount of weight, and I'm not even like remotely comfortable with the dad bod I have at the moment to like want another 30. You know, I guess on the flip side, I could probably live off Fifth Avenue bars for like 6 months, but you have to have like not super high, but a fairly high body fat percentage because you got to stay warm. And like these are all like little things that people don't take into consideration. But it's set attainable goals. And the thing I said here is like, develop ourselves emotionally using lists as a way of feeling productive and like you're making headway. You don't have to be all the way, there. And I think that's a huge, huge part of it is the accumulation of small wins or playing small ball versus always swinging for the home run.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a whole lot to be gained by that just approach in general. And you could throw that out to the entire training process. Do I want to be the guy who runs 15 miles on Sunday, but I'm so wrecked I can only run one time the rest of the week and it's pretty slow, or do I want to be the person who can run 5 or 6 times a week that are all quality and I can keep doing it for weeks and weeks and weeks?
Yeah.
It's be smart about it, and again, set attainable goals and be realistic with them. And most importantly, have somebody in your corner that can tell you if your goal is idiotic or not, or if you're, which people don't really want to have either. It's like, I don't want you to tell me no, but it's not about telling you no, that goal might not be the best idea. It's how about we reframe it and go after X, Y, and Z first. Let's address the problem, not just create a solution, and we don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
Which is again something that athletes are incredibly known for.
Well, man, that's sort of it's weird because that's the way of the world it's pushing us. Every time I open any kind of endurance website or something, somebody's just swam around, like that guy that swam around Great Britain. Screw the English Channel. He swam around the whole island. Or, somebody's running from Virginia to L.A., in, 3 weeks or whatever with no food. It's like everything. But there's everybody's trying to up the ante on everything, and we just don't know what's going on with that. And I think that sort of sets people in their own little world of, I did a sprint. Maybe I should do a double Ironman next year. Mm-hmm. But, hey, speaking of dad bods, did you order those Crushing Iron Dockers?
They didn't have any available with the 4-pleat model. They only had 2 pleats, and so I'm going to wait until the 5 pleats are in stock.
That's outstanding. What's the next one? Help someone. Now, I like this a lot because what do they say? What's the Latin root for teacher? It means actually student or something like that.
I think so.
I don't know if you ever heard that, but like when you try to help or teach someone, you learn a lot and you get a lot out of it. And there's always that ethical question: are you doing it for them or for yourself? Well, maybe for both. And I think it really can and not only help you understand what's going on and maybe find some of your own answers, but obviously it helps someone else, and there's no harm ever in doing that. So it's just it's an interesting one that I think if you have a habit of giving your time and helping people without expecting anything in return, that does build confidence, because it just makes you feel better about what's going on with yourself, and it helps you understand where you're going and clarifies a lot of pieces.
And in general, it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Just go out and be nice and kind to people, and be helpful and be true about it. And I think, you won't expect anything from it, because you got something so much grander than you would have expected by, feeling better about yourself or the way that you're doing things, or coming to that conclusion. And so, yeah, I think that's a pretty short one. Is just, be kind and give back and be grateful, and then help people, or do your best to help put other people in that same situation where they have opportunities to also feel that kind of purpose and positivity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, this one is interesting. Separate your weaknesses. And it was a little tricky for me to, grasp that, but I think it basically boils down to certain things are very, very hard to change. Whether you were talking about last cast about how Michael Phelps has the perfect swimmer's body.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how hard I try, that's probably not going to happen for me. So I have to accept the fact that I don't have the perfect body for swimming, so I have to compensate and whatever, but I don't need to beat myself up for that. You know what I mean? There's certain things that we just can't change about ourselves, so there's no reason to take that personally or whatever, I guess. That's kind of how I looked at this thing.
You don't need to identify with a person, but it also doesn't mean it's necessarily your identity either. Like, it may be something that's harder for you to accomplish, but it doesn't mean you're not able to accomplish it either. Or that the fact that you can't doesn't mean that it's a personal shot to who you are as a human, or your characteristics in many, many other areas.
Yeah, you are who you are.
Exactly, you are who you are, and you're that way for a reason, and you're best suited for a lot of things. And it's like we oftentimes, because triathlon for a lot of people can be also consuming with their thoughts and their preparation and their Facebook posts and their life. It's like they begin to not separate things that they're struggling with in both areas. And I'm like I think going back to the conversation I had with this athlete yesterday, I was like, for all intents and purposes, from what I know about you, you're a pretty awesome husband, father, and man. You're really great at those things. So why do you just naturally forget about those and just assume that you're this? But we have such a difficult time, again, going back to the strengths part and the fears. It's like we always like to identify more often with what we aren't or what we don't have. And because that's society now. It's like it's more about aligning yourself and proving your allegiance to a specific religion or a specific diet or a specific political view, and making sure everybody knows that, versus just quietly going about your business and being who you are. And we all have strengths and weaknesses. The same with training. It's your weaknesses don't always have to identify or be magnified because they threaten the way that you feel or the way that you think you should feel about everything in your life all the time. And so for me, as somebody in recovery, some people could look at or I know personally some people that are in recovery who look at being in recovery and being, having the disease of addiction that is inside of them. They could say, "Oh, that's just a weakness. See, I'm weak. I can't do this, or I'm always going to have this." And or you could see it as a strength in terms of what it's made you into and what you've been forced to confront and deal with and learn about yourself and learn about being in recovery and addiction, all the things you learn along the way, and how much of a strength that actually is. Because it'll totally sound odd to people, but while
But
I'm
you had to figure that out, though, right?
I had to figure. Oh, totally.
Because at first you're like, "Oh man, I'm flawed."
You think and I guess that's a better way of putting it, as separating your weaknesses. It's more of is you attach with your defect.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had this conversation with you many times, as I told you, and it's probably very, very, very hard for people to grasp. Is I am absolutely 100% grateful that I had to go through the things I went through, and now I'm here where I am.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I hadn't, I feel like I wouldn't even be close to where I am right now. Which I'm sure it's hard to like. Why would you want to be that? Like, you can't explain it unless you've been through it. But I guess it's turning we're so afraid to be defective. Because again, that's again like what social media is now. It's like, let's just take a quick snapshot to constantly prove 24/7 on a feed, on a headline, on somebody's scroll that I'm okay. Don't think for 1 second that I have like any kind of an issue, or that I had a bad day, or that things aren't going great. Because God forbid people understand that I'm actually human on this earth, and we're all struggling with like all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we always attach to and defend and like almost to like overcompensate to the level of how much we attach to this defectiveness or weakness, instead of thinking, all right, well, in turn, how can I address this? How can I say that I'm not this? It's just a weakness that I have, which everyone does. Like there are a million things that I am not very good at. And some of them, my wife reminds me all the time. There are plenty of things that I'm not very good at.
Keeping in check.
Keeping me in check. But again, it's not. It's just who you are, and it's not an identity. It's not a label, and it's not. Listen. One of the hardest things I ever had to grasp was you are not your thoughts, and this is the deeper level, but. Is you are not your thoughts, because so oftentimes we think so many like really bad things about ourselves, or we tell ourselves these really negative stories, or that we attach these weaknesses to who we are intrinsically as a human, and that's how we'll be judged. But if you ask somebody to like point to who they are, they're not going to point to their brain. They usually point to their heart, because that's who you truly are. But you get to like, you filter through your mind and your thoughts and your experiences, and it totally gets all like jumbled up soup. But again, separate those weaknesses, remember your strengths, and don't and live by your strengths, and be aware of your weaknesses.
Yeah, I think
don't flip it around, because you need to be aware of them at the same point.
You can be aware of them, and in some way accept them, because you're in recovery. I came from an alcoholic home, and as a child of an alcoholic, there's you know all about this, but it's like there's a big laundry list of character traits that most people have if they grew up in that kind of environment. Mm-hmm. And at first I was like, holy crap. First time I saw him, I was like, oh my man, that is me, A, and B, man, am I flawed? I've got some serious problems. But over time, I've learned to look at them as like, okay, how do I, if I spin that, there's a lot of good stuff there that taught me. You know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. One of the things, for example, is, you tend to go into isolation, and I still struggle with that. But what happened through that process was it kind of made me introspective, for example. And I've been able to maybe use that as a way to see both sides of the stories, or just think through. I kind of overthink sometimes, and that's so whatever. But it helped my creativity, for example, I think, and there's a lot of bonuses that come out of it. So if you don't look at it as a flaw, as a negative per se, it's change the word for weakness. There's something in there. There's a lesson in there. There's a possibility in there, and I always thought that was huge.
It's such a great point. It's about running yourself as a business. Do you want to continue to hire people that are only really good at what you do already? Because that's not going to help the sum of the entire unit, the entire business. Or do you want to hire people who are better than things like that fill in or help address weaknesses so that you can A, be elevated, and B, learn. From like my wife, we are total opposites in so many areas. And it's great because she is wonderful at things that I absolutely just generally suck at, or I just don't have any interest in. But she loves that, and the same. So you complement each other. The same thing is like you want to hire people as a business. You want to hire people that have a strength or experience and a knowledge that you don't have, and to A, elevate everything as a whole, but also to be exposed to what it's like to have that strength, and then you can figure things out on your own, and then hopefully mitigate that weakness into where it's just not. Because listen, there's a gigantic difference in this is a weakness and this is just not a strength. It doesn't have to be either. Well, I'm not really strong at that. I'm weak at it. It doesn't have to be both. It can just be I have these specific strengths that are really strong, 10% of them, and then I have these 10% of things where I'm just that I really struggle with, and then the middle 80%, I'm just average Joe on. I'm just average Joe on. So I think we kind of need to make that differentiation between the fact that it's not that black or white, that it's actually so much less of black and so much less of white and a ton of gray. And that sometimes in your life, weaknesses might turn into strengths, strengths might turn into weaknesses, or things in the middle might turn into strong. It's always rotating and moving. But again, it's detach yourself from that feeling of it being a defect.
Yeah, I want to throw one thing on that, because swimming to me is stuff I hear about all the time. I'm not getting faster. Well, and a lot of people that aren't quote unquote getting faster put in a lot of work. So maybe that speed in the water doesn't seem like your strength, but you know what? You're building power and you're building endurance, and that may pay off, and that may be better in something like an Ironman or longer races. You know what I'm saying? Like the work that you're doing towards your weakness all of a sudden becomes a strength, and it just sort of morphs into a different kind of application, because you get tougher at it, maybe. You know what I mean?
Resistance to fatigue.
Yeah. You might get you're trying to get fast, but all of a sudden your byproduct is you just got stronger, and you can outlast that faster swimmer. Anyway, let's get through this last two here. This is a huge one, of course. Stop comparing, to other people. We've talked about this a bunch of times, but we always see pictures of beautiful people and amazing lifestyles, and that's not us. I mean, it's not even them, probably. It's like
it's marketing.
Yeah, I
Jesus,
see.
People it's marketing. Like
every single day now, I feel like I get down there and I'll see some guy my age in his 50s squatting 300 pounds and just ripped to shreds, and I'll be like, it's that fine line between, is that guy motivating me right now, or do I think he's a douchebag for doing this? It's sort of like
right. But again, like when you talk about, I have a few thoughts real quick on stop comparing, is that we love and are obsessed on doing it, obviously, because that's the definition of comparison, but of doing it both ways. Like if you're on social media or somebody, you're like, gosh, like you look up on Facebook or Instagram or social media, you look, and don't be lying to me, I know you're like this because everybody is. You look up two kinds of people. One, who are just infinitely way so far out of what you could probably end up becoming, or that's even like reality, just to see what's going on. And then you look up the other person who is going to have a much worse life than you. Like an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend or an ex-spouse or an ex-boss, just to see see, I'm doing better than they are. You compare yourself like that. And then you compare yourself, or maybe you compare yourself, and this is super common with athletes who begin to get consistent, is they compare and they live and they react based on who they used to be. They aren't running or cycling or swimming in shorter events, or when they look at their watch and they think, I can't do this because my mind is still wrapped around the athlete that I was 2 years ago, not the one that I actually know I am right here and now at this moment. And so you end up getting in your own way. And again, it goes back to how things were created in your mind or created in, and just it's a whole subject and like deep dive in like the human psyche of how experiences shape us, and then how we end up comparing things in life and how we associate ourselves with that. Like the high school athlete who comes from being the greatest athlete on the planet, consider the greatest athlete that's ever come through his high school, and he's an incredible football player, and then he goes off to some college and gets on the team and realizes that he's like not even close to ever playing again. Did he go from greatest athlete to worst athlete? Nope. It's all relative. Also, to the same extent where an athlete at their local school isn't that really that good, considered by really that good of an athlete, but all the athletes around him are just like insanely great. But if he had gone to a different school, he'd be valedictorian and prom king and the varsity captain in every single sport imaginable. Does that change who he is or was? No. It's just the experiences in which you've gone through that obviously at different points in your life ends up just like thinking your way and believing your way into who you are here at this very moment, listening to this podcast right now. And then that's how you compare yourself to different people. And even though you have no idea what is actually their reality or how they even got to their reality, it's just like the comparison thing in general is just like the amount of things we tend to concern ourselves with versus the amount of things that we actually truly care about are widely different. And when you stop comparing yourself and you just stop giving a shit about what everybody else does because it doesn't matter, because you only focus on yourself and what matters most to you, and you remove your ego out of it, whether it's promoting your ego or it's defending and protecting your ego. You know, I think I said this on a podcast probably last year, was that the way that people go about dancing is you go on the dance floor and you're like, I don't want to dance because everybody's looking at me. I don't want to be this. I don't want to be the point of attention. Everybody's looking at me on the dance floor. Then again, on the dance floor, you look around and you're like, why is nobody looking at me? Why is nobody paying attention? Like, I'm out here dancing. Like, why is nobody looking? So it's that wrapped up like ego that everyone has, whether it's pronounced or not, or way off the deep end or not. It's protecting yourself and making the focus of you and not the defense or the protection or the projection of what's most important or where your ego is at the time.
I am deeply fascinated with kind of something you touched on regarding athletes that go to college that are stars, and then maybe even kind of stars in college football or whatever, or basketball, and then what happens to them after that. I was listening to an interview with the guy who produced or directed the U, that Miami football team, that 30 for 30 documentary about the Miami Hurricanes, and he was talking about like some of the players that were on Miami who were arguably one of the best college football teams in history at the time, and how some of them are driving. One of the guys was driving like an ice cream truck now, stuff like that. And it's like, and what they did was the university sent out a mass email to all their ex-athletes and said they were looking for highlight players. And a lot of them aren't playing highlight now or whatever. But the point is like, it's fascinating to me that how quickly things can change in life. You're on top of the world. Next thing you know, you're a sophomore starting for a big-time team or whatever, and you're a senior, and you're pretty solid but not good enough to make the draft. And then all of a sudden, it's like you look up and you're in a whole different situation. So I think it's about kind of what you're saying, stop comparing to other people, accept your situation and look at it and how you can move it ahead best. If you're not as fast as you used to be or whatever, how does that translate into where you can go next? As you get older, I look at that all the time. It's like man, I used to be this or that, and I realize I can't keep up with that. You have to accept that and just make the most of it. It's like some of these athletes in pro sports, how they set themselves up to be announcers, or they know early on that they're going to be a coach or something like that, and they kind of bridge that gap, because otherwise you're going to look around and be like, whoa, always looking back at what was instead of moving forward.
Yep.
The last one is look confident, and this one sounds kind of weird, but they always talk about how if you walk in the room with your shoulders back, you're going to feel confident. And I think there's something to it, the body language and things like that. For me, there's certain times when I'm training or whatever, I feel like I found that posture, and I try to cement that feeling into my head. And I talk about look confident, or, one of the keys to being a good swimmer is to actually believe that you are a good swimmer, or believe that you're a swimmer first, and have that in your mind. These are like mental games, and believe in it. I guess a lot of people, lose a lot of weight and they get a lot better shape in the sport, and I see comparison pictures sometimes, and I think that's awesome. I think there's a good ways to remind yourself that, man, you're actually moving forward and you can be confident about what's going down. Anything else?
Looking confident, it's such a tough one, man.
Yeah.
Because I take that as like two totally different like ways. Like you can dress confident, doesn't mean you're confident.
Right.
Or you can be confident and look or dress any way you want to because you just don't care what everybody else thinks.
Yeah.
I think projection of confidence is a tough one in terms of looking that way. But I think it just goes back to confronting your fears, and what does that approach physically look like for you when it terms to look confident, modify appearance. And I think it's about body language. It's setting, again, it's all in general about setting yourself up for success.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that look like to you? And, how can you go best about doing that? And I think that's ultimately just the question you have to ask is how can I propel myself forward by covering every fine detail that's going to help me, that's going to help put myself in a situation to where I'm going to be successful. And if that means changing the way you look or not changing the way you look, or just exuding or taking on I'm going to look more people in the eye today to be more confident. It's got nothing the way you look. We're not obviously not talking about dressing in fashion here, because who the hell wants to take advice from you or I in that category? But in terms of it's about overall preparation and addressing things that matter. And it's not about the tie you wear. It's about focusing on the things that you need to focus on and to set yourself up for success. Yeah. And doing the things that are required. And I think that's the last piece, because it's just one of the finer details that you can or can't address. But yeah, it's all consuming. It's a bunch of things that we need to address. I think it's really it's a comprehensive list, obviously, but I think if you're struggling with confidence in anywhere or any aspect or avenue of your life, it's a great time, and as always, to address strengths and make sure that they're strengths that are going to stay strengths. Because if you don't, let's say you don't use them, you lose them. And same thing with weaknesses. Don't continue to work on them and prepare to not always have them, instead of just assuming they'll always be there. Mm-hmm. And just be confident in general. I mean, it's like the only one that's going to be graded on your life is you. And so do it the way you want to, train the way you want to, race the way that you want to, set yourself up for success as best you can, and be the only judge of yourself.
Yeah.
And be gracious, when you do it.
Yeah. And just one more thing relating to racing and why we talk about confidence in general as being important in a race. And I think the reason is because if you're confident, you're probably prepared, or at least mentally prepared and ready to go. And what that translates into is being more relaxed. And I think that's a huge factor when you're out racing, if you can be relaxed.
100%.
Because you're saving energy, and there's all kinds of benefits of being a little more chill, getting into that water, starting your day kind of in a positive abundance mode rather than being negative and kind of not abundant. What's the opposite of that?
Limited and high strung.
Yeah.
Right. But no, I agree about being relaxed and being relaxed like you and I are at the end of this bonus cast of an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah. Longest one of the year, probably.
We've had quite a few over an hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's do the best you can as always. Hopefully this has been hopefully you can take this into more aspects of your life than just your trainer session tonight at 5:00. But just keep working on it. As always, we appreciate you listening. If you have any questions or comments or concerns about anything, Mike, you can reach out to him, crushingiron@gmail.com. And as always, you can reach out to me directly about any questions, comments, or concerns as well, or info about coaching or training if you're interested at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Well.
All right, dude. Go Vols.
Yeah, good luck tonight. I'll be watching.
I know you will.
I'll be watching. I'm watching it all. Sulking.
And then next week's race week for a lot of people. So we'll be diving into some of those and maybe a little Oceanside pre-talk and IRSF Texas 70.3 chit chat. But enjoy your weekend. Train hard. Have fun. Stay happy and healthy. And we'll see you on Monday.
All right, man. See you later.